What is up, guys? Rick Kakis here. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me, and today we are going to be discussing Borderlands 3. Now, the massive gameplay reveal event was only a few days ago. Tons of information and gameplay spilled out. 2K flew me out to that event and provided for my hotel and accommodations, and I was able to get 2 different gameplay sessions with Borderlands 3, so I played it for over 2.5 hours. And in this video, what we're going to do here is focus on the changes, the improvements that Borderlands 3 brings to the table, and try to answer the question, is Borderlands 3 worth the wait? Because Borderlands 2 came out also in September back in 2012. When Borderlands 3 releases, it will have been a 7-year wait for Borderlands fans between 2 and 3. Are the changes that Borderlands 3 brings substantial enough? Are they differentiating enough to warrant this wait? Is Borderlands 3 the proper sequel we've been waiting for, or does it fall flat? That's the purpose of this video, so let's get started. And we're going to just go over those big changes. The first one I wanted to talk about is the changes to how the leveling system and the skill trees work within the game. So the skill trees are pretty substantially different in Borderlands 3. In Borderlands, previous Borderlands games, you would pick a certain class or a certain character and you would have your action skill. For example, in Borderlands 2, if you picked Axton, you would have your turret as your action skill. And that action skill would be the same no matter which path you chose for Axton. But in Borderlands 3, things are a little bit different. You have your 3 different sections of the skill tree, just like you normally do, but each one of those sections has a certain different action skill. So, for example, when you're playing Zane, that character has 3 separate, totally separate action skills to choose from. You can have a little sentinel drone that flies around, shoots enemies for you. You can plant a barrier that will absorb incoming fire and can be upgraded to heal you and so on. And then you also have a clone that you can put down to distract enemies and will also shoot enemies. So you get to pick, well, with Zane specifically, you can replace your grenade and pick 2 action skills, but for all the other characters, you're going to pick one of 3 very different action skills. So already, you're adding a bunch more to the mix. You basically have, triple the amount of customization and character options in terms of action skills, because instead of having 4 characters with 1 action skill each, you have 4 characters with 3 action skills each. On top of that, you also have new augmentation skills. These are meant to improve your action skill. So, for example, with Zane, the little sentinel drone that went around shooting guys, you could augment that so that it now shot cryo rounds, which was very useful. Freezing an enemy and preventing them from moving and attacking you is much more useful than just damaging them, right? And these were present definitely in previous Borderlands games. They were present as just normal skills within your skill tree. If we're going to use Axton again from Borderlands 2 as an example, the skill that let him put missiles on his turret, well, that would be an augmentation skill in Borderlands 3. They're just kind of separate and they're more easily distinguished from other skills. And you're going to be able to put 2 different augments on 1 action skill. That's very cool, and there's a lot of different augmentations within the game. And presumably, you're going to be able to pick your special action skill from a certain skill tree, and then potentially level up a different skill tree, pick different augments from that one, and really have a lot of creative possibilities when it comes to making your build. So absolutely, in terms of leveling your character, speccing out, and the process of actually making your build within Borderlands 3, it's a pretty vast improvement over previous iterations. So that's all good, but the biggest factor of any Borderlands game is the weapons. This crazy random weapon system that creates millions of different guns and provides so much variety. What are the changes there? Well, here, there's some big changes and also some big concerns. So basically, all of the different manufacturers, the brands within Borderlands, Dahl, Hyperion, Jacobs, etc., they've all been essentially redesigned in Borderlands 3, and they're I guess gimmicks have become even more gimmicky. And gimmick may not be the right word here, but they are all very unique and very distinct from one another. For example, in Borderlands 2, Hyperion weapons would just get more accurate as you fired them. And that was really it. In Borderlands 3, that same thing happens, but now every time you aim down sights with them, they provide a little bit of a shield around you to protect you from incoming damage. Another example, in Borderlands 2, doll weapons would just be burst fire weapons, like they were always burst fire. Well, in Borderlands 3, they now have select fire modes, so you can get a pistol that has single fire or 4-round burst, and you can change between that, and it's going to provide a little bit different damage, especially for critical hits, and it's going to provide you a different level of zoom switching in between them. You can find an SMG, for example, that's fully automatic or burst, 4-round burst, let's say, or 5-round burst, or maybe fully automatic and single fire. You have these different variations within the gimmick. It's not just one gimmick. A great example is Tediore. In Borderlands 2, you would reload and throw your Tediore weapon and it would explode like a grenade. That was it. That same feature is basically reintroduced into Borderlands 3. You reload a Tediore weapon and you're going to throw it and it's going to do something. Now, instead of exploding, it can maybe also just explode like it did in Borderlands 2, but maybe it will bounce around before exploding. Maybe it will explode into a MIRV explosion, so it will explode and then several other explosions will pop out of that. And the number of MIRV explosions will change, so sometimes it's ×3 projectiles, sometimes it's ×4, etc. But you also have ones that, when thrown, will sprout legs and chase after enemies while shooting them. You also have ones that will just act as turrets. You also have ones that will act as proximity mines. So Borderlands 3 has really doubled down and expanded upon the unique factors for each manufacturer. And while this makes for gameplay very interesting, like when you pick up a weapon in Borderlands 3, even if you're using a purple weapon and you pick up a random green weapon, that green weapon still feels unique, it still feels different, it still feels like it has a place. A Maliwan weapon that can switch between two different elements, that's such a useful factor that in that scenario, for that gunfight, you may need that unique factor of that manufacturer more than you need a gun of a higher rarity, and that's super cool. The concerning part, however, is because the manufacturer uniqueness has been so doubled down on, and each different gun is so unique that you're gonna end up having manufacturers that just aren't as good as other ones. A great example is Atlas. When I was in a big gunfight, I had several different purple rarity weapons. One was an Atlas pistol. And the Atlas unique factor is that you can have the alternate fire mode, which down in the D-pad is now going to be your alternate fire mode in Borderlands 3. A ton of different guns use this. So if you have the Maliwan weapon, it switches elements. A Jacob's weapon switches fire modes. The Vladif weapon, it goes to the underbarrel attachment, etc. But in any event, for Atlas weapons, it switches between a tracker dart. So you press down on the D-pad, you shoot a tracker dart or a tracker shotgun blast or whatever it is at a bunch of enemies. And then when you shoot, it's going to have smart bullets that will automatically track after those hit enemies. Which is great because you can hit an enemy with a tracker dart, go behind cover, shoot out of that cover, and the bullets will bend around and hit that enemy. Very good in that scenario. But it didn't actually do that much damage. And in a practical gunfight with a bunch of guys charging at you, the Atlas weapon really suffered and was doing way less damage than my Jacob's weapon and then my Torg weapon. So the concerning part about making these manufacturer gimmicks so unique is that if one isn't as good, it falls behind drastically. And like, let's say in that example, Atlas weapons just don't cut it. They just don't do enough damage because all Atlas weapons have this exact same gimmick. Does that mean an entire manufacturer will basically be like discounted? People just won't pick up Atlas guns? That's my concern. Now, hopefully Gearbox has balanced this properly. I can't say 100% whether or not this will happen, but it is something to keep in mind, and it is the potential downfall of a weapon system like this one in Borderlands 3. Now, we also have the secondary factor of weapons in Borderlands games, and that is unique weapons, red text weapons that do something out of the norm. We did see a few examples shown within this gameplay reveal event. For example, when you killed the brain boss, he had a legendary drop with a certain red text that, when thrown, it would create like little brain turrets that would stick onto walls and shoot enemies, so very unique from the normal TDR guns. Gearbox also stated that they're going to have more boss fights than ever, which is good news because boss fights are generally associated with a certain unique drop. So more boss fights than any other game means more unique drops than any other game. We also got a good look at several different legendary weapons in the game. They did look pretty unique and also pretty powerful. There's also quite a lot of returning legendaries from previous Borderlands games. For example, I got the conference call, which was a great sight. I also saw the Infinity being dropped as well, so some of those nostalgic weapons are returning. And that's very, very good, because when you're talking about making an endgame build, you often rely on those red text weapons with unique abilities that combine well with certain skills or other weapons or grenades or shields and so on. In fact, grenades and shields is an interesting one. We didn't come in contact with many of them, so I can't comment too much on them, but it did seem like there's some more and different unique factors in terms of those two items this time around. Something else that's really cool that I don't see a lot of people talking about is the vehicle customization. Previously, you could pick a couple of different weapons, choose between a couple of different vehicle types. Now, you have the option to really customize your vehicle. You have several different vehicle types, like the ones we saw. We had a Bandit Technical that actually went out and found like a special one. Then we've got a normal buggy, and then we've got the Cyclone, which is a giant wheel one, and you can go in and you have like primary weapons, so you can select between a bunch of different, of one type of weapon. Then you have like the turret, the secondary, I guess, weapon. You have a bunch of different options there. Then you got the wheel options, where you can go in and put on different types of wheels. You even have different types of engines and stuff like that. So you're going to be able to craft a vehicle more suited to what you want to do way better in Borderlands 3, and that's very good. Like, there isn't a ton of progression in terms of vehicles from Borderlands to Borderlands 2 to Borderlands the pre-sequel, aside from just kind of different types of vehicles. This deep customization is really something I'm glad to see. And you also have the different worlds within the game. Now, this is something that a lot of people are really, really hyped up about, and I am as well. I think this is a good feature, but Pandora, like, although most of it was kind of desert region, it kind of had no rules. Like, there was ice regions of Pandora, there was kind of more jungly regions of Pandora, more vegetation. There was the desert regions, of course. There was the Iridian Scar. There was a bunch of different variety just on Pandora, because the developers basically did whatever they wanted and just said, yeah, it's Pandora, don't worry about it. The different worlds definitely opens up the possibility for different NPCs. I think that's the main thing that you're going to see a big difference of, is crazy alien beasts that weren't on Pandora. But again, it's like they could have done that just on Pandora, still sticking to Pandora, just saying, yeah, we have all these different regions of this one world. But having these separate planets, having your base, the Sanctuary 3 spaceship, that's a very cool feature, and it feels like a definite progression. You're finally leaving this one planet and you're exploring so many more different planets, and it's the perfect vessel for future DLCs. Borderlands is one of those funny games where DLCs and the prospect of a season's pass like isn't a bad thing. A lot of fans, like, we grew up with Borderlands seasons passes, and we love them, and we know that they often provide, well, they pretty much always provide great quality DLCs. So that's going to be great, and the fact that you can just have, yep, new DLC, new planet. New DLC, new planet. Again, that's just like the easiest formula and the most exciting formula to come out of this multiple planets thing. And I think that is a really cool feature. And moving on from there, like, the last thing I want to talk about is general quality of life improvements. And here, it's interesting. Like, for example, mantling and also the ability to slide. Like, when those are shown off in the trailer, people were cheering. Like, you saw your character slide, you're like, woo, oh my goodness, sliding in Borderlands. That's great. But I mean, it's 2019. And that's kind of the thing. Yes, they are absolute improvements over previous Borderlands iterations, but could you imagine if they didn't have those features? Like, it's just the natural progression of where games have come to. So I don't think we should be giving that much credit for including things that just every game has at this point, right? If you know what I'm saying. But there are still some definitely easier quality of life improvements over other Borderlands games. Simple stuff like the fact that you can go to an ammo vending machine, press one button and refill all your ammo. The fact that you can see the item of the day displayed like when you kind of just go up to a vending machine. You don't have to go inside and view the item of the day. Like simple things like that, there's actually quite a lot of in this game, and they were definitely appreciated. You can switch between different quests with just the D-pad, pressing like side on the D-pad, so you didn't have to go into your inventory and like find the side mission you were on. That's another it's a little thing, but whew, it felt so good, like coming from so many other Borderlands games. So, is this game worth the 7-year wait? Well, there's still some unknowns, and that big one is the endgame. Like, what is Borderlands planning to do for the endgame? It's widely assumed that there's going to be some raid bosses, or at least one. You know, but how many? Are there any other specific activities geared towards the endgame? That's the big factor. And again, I would point to Borderlands 2. If you go back and play Borderlands 2, right now, it's a fantastic package. There's a lot to do once you hit max level. Several different raid bosses, Digistruct Peak, all that stuff. But that's because you have Borderlands 2 and a bunch of DLCs. Just Borderlands 2, the vanilla game, there isn't that much to do. There's Terramorphous, and that's kind of it. Like, that's really kind of it. And Borderlands 3 is really going to have to expand on those endgame options to really feel like a proper sequel to Borderlands 2 and really feel like a game that belongs to hang in 2019. Because does this feel like a proper sequel already? Like, pretty much, yes. Everything is a very clear evolution from previous Borderlands games. The weapon system is crazier. The skill trees are more diverse and better. All the quality of life improvements, the improvements to vehicles, all that stuff. Great. But within those 7 years of waiting for Borderlands 3, I don't know if you guys noticed, but quite a lot of good games came out within that time, and kind of the bar of video games overall has just naturally risen as games have constantly tried to one-up each other. So in 2019, again, Borderlands 3 is gonna have to bring it. From what I've seen, it's certainly coming out the gate strong. It is absolutely coming out the gate strong, and I think if you're a Borderlands fan, if you're a diehard fan, you will be happy with this game. My one concern and my one hesitation is that endgame. I really want to know what Gearbox is planning to do for this game, how they're planning to support it as well. Is it just going to be big DLC drops, but are there going to be events in between and stuff like that? I'm curious about that as well. In the meantime, again, things are looking very good. Things are looking up, and I think Borderlands fans should generally be happy about this game. I certainly had a blast playing it, despite my potential reserves about, how content may shake up in the future. Now, I would be remiss to not mention a factor outside of the game itself, but the Epic Games Store controversy. A lot of players are absolutely furious that Borderlands 3 is an Epic Games exclusive for a certain amount of time. And while part of me just wants to say, oh, those people are overreacting, the game is still the game, whether or not it's on Steam, the one factor that really does stand out, like, I don't use a lot of the features of Steam that people are saying, oh, look at all these things Steam has and the Epic Games Store doesn't have, so I don't care that they're not in the Epic Games Store, I just play the game. But that one factor that really does bug me is security. Like, the Epic Games Store is notoriously easy to have your account taken and stuff like that, and that does very much concern me. And I mean, like, hopefully the Epic Games Store can shore that stuff up before Borderlands 3 launches, but it's unlikely. And in the grand scheme of things, yes, Gearbox is going to get a bigger portion of the revenue because the Epic Games Store has a better split with developers, and maybe Steam should look into implementing something like that. It isn't like Valve doesn't have the money, for goodness sakes, but is that worth it to piss off so much of your fan base that just wants to buy it on Steam. And honestly, I'm not sure it is, especially because in terms of consoles, like all that stuff doesn't matter, and consoles have the biggest volume of sales. So I don't know why it isn't more important in Gearbox's eyes to give people the option and to keep customers happy, in my opinion. I just don't think it's worth the potential slight increase in revenue. So we're gonna have to see how that whole situation shakes up as well. However, that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed, found this interesting. If you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Borderlands 3 content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you guys want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickKakis. That's linked in the description down below. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.